Um, okay, we'll get started then. Kishore, maybe you can share your screen.
Yes, Kiran.
Yeah. So hi everyone. So glad to be back with our regular meetups after a big conference. Uh, so yeah. So today we'll be having like 4 talks. So our first speaker is Kishore. Uh,
Yes, can you see the screen?
yes.
Awesome. So today I would like to talk about something called FlowJV, the library I've developed for data validation and data collection. So we all know about forms, right? So in any web application, one of the most important thing is a form. Like they are very vital to any kind of application. Through forms, we can collect data from a user and do some kind of processing and send it to the server and stuff. And even then, creating forms is one of the hard parts in our entire web application lifecycle, because there are a lot of things that we need to take care of when we try to create forms. Like we need to have validations, we need to make sure that all the data is properly taken care, user experience, UI. I mean, there are a lot of stuff that we need to take care in parallel, and to make everything work perfectly is something really hard. And to solve this problem, we've got tons of libraries for that. And FlowJV, the one I developed, is just like one another solution. And let me tell you like why exactly we need I have come up with this solution and what is the motivation behind it. So like let's suppose we have a programming language, the one we write every day. In a programming language, we execute instructions one after the other. Like we run statement 1, statement 2, statement 3, and then 4, and then 5, right? So program is written in top down fashion, where we execute instructions one after the other. And then we have got conditionals, where we say if some condition is met, only then execute some statements, and if it is not met, execute other statements. So this is something that we are very familiar with, where we run instructions top down fashion. So in a programming language perspective, we've got a lot of other constructs as well, like if condition, switch cases, for loops, functions, and we can use all these constructs to create as complicated programs as possible. So in the same way, I have taken the same semantics and applied it to creating forms, right? What if we can apply the same semantics that we are looking in a programming language and apply it in the context of collecting data from users in form, like from a user in a web application? So that is what FlowJV is all about. So in FlowJV also, just like we have in a programming language set of instructions and then conditionals, in FlowJV, we write instructions saying, all right, collect property 1 of an object, and then property 2, and then 3. Like, I mean, just like we execute instructions in a programming language, in FlowJV, we give instructions asking, the library to collect information one after the other. In just in the same way we have if conditions in programming language, we can also instruct saying that, uh, if some condition is met, only then collect another property, otherwise, collect some other set of properties. So just like in programming language, we've got different semantics in FlowJV. Like you got if conditionals, switch cases, validations, arrays, and there is something called JSON expression. So the way I look at FlowJV is just like a programming language alternative to data collection and validation. So let me quickly show you like what exactly I mean when I say, it's just like another programming language. So in FlowJV, we create form by defining our data requirements. So the schema that we write is going to be a single source of truth for our data requirements, validations, and everything from UI till UX. Everything is going to be embedded within the schema. And one more thing to notice, the schema is common for both UI as well as data requirements. That means the UI related configuration, like whether the input type is going to be password or any other nitty-gritty details of UI, can be embedded within the schema itself. So it is a unified schema for both data requirements as well as UI. So as I have already told you, like we define requirements as a set of instructions. So in FlowJV, we define something called flow schema, where I define type as object. And just like I told, we are going to give instructions one after the other, like just like in programming language, they all go into properties field. Like we define properties saying, all right, I want to collect an information of object from a user. Let us take an example of a registration form. So this is the details of a registration user, right? So what I'm trying to say is, to flow schema, like to the library I've defined, so we tell step by step that I would like to collect information of name, and then age, and then gender, email, password, confirm password, and then is the user employed or not. So this is just like a programming language where we execute instructions one after the other. We are giving data requirements one after the other. So the way it will show up the moment we define this is going to be like this, right? So just like in programming language, it's just for forms. And now once this is defined, we can tell like each different data requirement has got different type of data that we expect out of it. Like let's suppose I want age to be of type number, gender to be of type enum, which is one of male or female, and then is employed is going to be boolean. So based on this, the UI is also going to get reflected. Like if it is boolean, then it's going to be a checkbox, and if it is of type enum, then it's going to be of type dropdown. So this is all fine, but these keys are something that are data related, right? But when it comes to uh, showing to the user, we want to show a relevant useful information. Like this name key doesn't make sense. Like user needs to show UI related information. So for that, we can create labels to all of this data requirements saying, all right, for data key name, I want to show the label as name, and then for age, like all the relevant labels we can define. And then those are going to become our information now, like labels. And then there is UI related information as well. Like let's suppose by default string gets displayed as a text field, which is not desired. This should be of type password. As I told, FlowJV is about having your data requirements as well as UI related configuration put at one single place. So I define UI related information by saying that I want UI to be of type password, right? In which case I can see that it's going to be reflected as a password field. And then I can define validations. Like let's suppose for confirm password should be, I mean, the validation for confirm password is that confirm password should match password. So for every data requirement we give, we are going to have something called validations field where we can list out list of validations that we want to perform on that specific field. So in this case, confirm password. So in confirm password, we're going to say that, all right, for validations, I want to execute this logic where I want to make sure that data.password, data is nothing but the object, the value we are collecting from the user. In this case, password is going to be stored in data.password, and that password should be equal to the ref. Ref is nothing but the property under validation. So with this defined, now we can see that if I type something different, and because confirm password is not equal to password, it immediately throws me an error. So like, let's suppose if I say hello and then hello, though those both, unless and until they are equal, it's going to throw an error. And then again, let's suppose I write some password, and if I submit it, it won't submit unless and until I enter confirm password, right? So all the validations happen at the time of submission as well. And then let's suppose I want to have an if conditional, just like in programming language where we write, so if some condition is met, only then I want to execute some instructions, otherwise not. In FlowJV also we can do the same. Like if some condition is met, so like if itself is like a statement where I say this is the condition that if data is employed, then I want to collect these properties. And in the same way, if it's true, then we are showing these properties. And in the same way, we can define something called else, sorry, false, where the condition becomes false. We can define some other properties. So that is about FlowJV in terms of data requirements. And then so there is one thing that is missing, that is in enum we need to define labels, label male and then label female. Yes. And then you can define UI type of this to be of type radio. So because this library is written in TypeScript, it's going to give you tons of information if you use TypeScript. And if not, then it's going to be a bit problem. Like let's suppose this is of type enum, right? So the moment I type it wrongly, because this is written in TypeScript, it's going to give you a better type checking and stuff. So even without TypeScript, you can always do it in JavaScript like this. So the syntax is for TypeScript, so don't get confused with this. So this is about requiring your data requirements within a schema, and that schema defines how the UI needs to be created and stuff. Now, creating this schema is fine. So how do we show this UI, right? So for that, all we do is there is this FlowJV form that gets imported from FlowJV React material, from which we are going to say, all right, so this is the form I want to render, and the schema for all the fields that need to be shown over here is flow schema that is imported from this file. And then auto flow is nothing but it is a way of it facilitates us to do some crazy stuff. Like let's suppose I will say key to be of type name, right? In which case only name is going to be shown. All right, it's not key, sorry, path. Yeah. So you can define your own layout using this. So because we define schema as a set of instructions, just like this, one after the other, you can always say auto flow, in which case all your data requirements are going to flow in a form one after the other, just like that. But if you want to define your elements in such a way that you want to have name over here and then password to be on top of name or whatever, then you can always break this flow and then create your own flow. And if you define objects, nested objects, like a flow schema by default expects object, and a property itself can be of a nested object. Like you can say that this is of type object, and then you can say the key that this object is going to have is like nested object, and then you can say properties are going to be type string, and this is of type you know key nest another object or whatever, and then you can define label as another. Now this will have another field which is something nested, right? So if I define multiple properties over here in terms of an object, you can also always autoflow based on that. Like another, let's see what happens if we define two keys with the same, two properties with the same key. In that case, when I type a value, they both get reflected, right? So the thing about autoflow is it says I want to autoflow the entire object. So that is what this autoflow without any parameters mean. Now, if I define all the rest of the objects in profile information, like I would say, I would like to have all the profile details in this object, and the properties are going to be so these are all the properties of the profile information. Yeah, these are all profile details, and this is another nested object, right? So the reason for this autoflow stuff is, now if I can say autoflow and the path to be of personal details, it just renders that part of the form. It's profile details, right? So you cannot see that there is no information about this nested object. So we can always create, I mean, we can always move that into a custom layout. Like let's suppose I will create another division and then have an autoflow defined with path is equal to nested object, and then I will set some style which is completely different. Margin top colon 100 and then background color red. So if you can see, like each part of the property is like you can define it in autoflow in whatever way you want to. Like this facilitates customization, and if you don't want customization, we can always have it at autoflow, and it just flows seamlessly. So one thing is you can go as complicated with requirements as possible, uh, and it's completely possible. Like let's suppose in FlowJV.js.org, the website on which this is hosted, you have something called playground. So here you have got examples. So on a simple form is nothing but an object, I mean a schema with nothing but an empty object. So this is directly a submit button, right? Now let's suppose I want to have a simple form. Now this is how it looks like. So we are defining all the schema, and then accordingly this gets rendered. Now there is also something called if condition, right? So if some condition is met, only then I want to have some keys defined. Otherwise I don't want other keys to be defined. So that is if condition. In the same way, we've got something called nested if condition. Like if condition is met, then we're going to show if statements, and within that if statement we are going to have another if, like it's nested. So just like in programming language where we go as complicated as possible, these are the basic constructs of FlowJV. Like whether it is if condition, switch case statements, or anything, you can just go as complicated as possible. And then you got something called switch case. So as it sounds, it's simple. Like you define some value and then you can always switch it based on switch cases. So another, so why do we need this? Like why do we need this, a completely different way of representing data in terms of FlowJV? So the reason being is, I would say there are like couple of reasons. Number one is all your data requirements are not tied with the UI anymore. So all your data requirements, whatever you've got, are everything stored within a schema, and that schema defines how the UI should be there and how it should be validated in the server side. So this schema is common for both server and UI. So UI uses all this UI part of information, and server side it just ignores it and validates the data. So it's a unified schema for both UI and server side. So this gives us an ability to not duplicate the code, but just keep it in one place. So the other second reason why this is uh, neat is because in FlowJV we have something called JSON expression. There is this same concept within Mapbox as well. So the validations can be defined in terms of an array representation, which is in itself serializable. So you can look into the documentation if you want to look into this further. So the idea is why we need our schema to be serializable is because we can store it in database, or we can create some tools like where we can develop forms dynamically. That is also another possibility. And third one is because when I want to create a form, I don't want to worry about UI very much in most of the requirements. I want to give the data requirements and I want to have a form. And that is what FlowJV provides. Like you just take your data requirements, put it in, and everything is taken care for you. So that is another reason why FlowJV is why I created FlowJV in specific reason. So the constructs you've got can be nested to whatever complex requirements, and it always scales. And there is also something called arrays. Working with arrays in web applications is real headache. So FlowJV gives you an ability to define something called arrays, where you can define, I want to have something called array, and then I want to have each item within that array of type of type string. Like let's suppose I want to collect information about and then I would define key for this array as hobbies. Now I can add hobbies as many as I want to. Like I will have a hobby 1, and then I have got hobby 2. So like you can define all of this stuff within FlowJV. And now if I submit the data, it shows that, all right, the hobbies I've got is this. And now you can even go crazy where you can say an array itself contains some arrays, right? Array of arrays. And if you type array, what happened? Got it. Maybe I missed this out, but yes, you should be able to do it. I think I messed up something. I'll fix that. So yeah, that is about arrays. So, and another important thing about FlowJV is the other important point that I want to mention is, so let's suppose I've got an if condition, right? So now I will enter some information called like whatever. And then I've got this data where if condition is true, this is the key in which this Boolean flag is stored. And then I've got this Andhra Pradesh. Now, if I enter else condition with some other data, now if I submit it, I'm only going to get else data, right? Now, if I toggle between the previous data, that data is also going to be persisted. Like even if you go with different conditions, the data is always going to be present, but at the time of submission there is going to be some step called normalization, where all the rest of the data that you're not trying to collect using this schema is going to be ignored. So yeah, so this is about FlowJV, and I have written the documentation about it much further on the docs, where you can see all the details of how you can use it and stuff. Yeah, so if you like it, I would suggest you to go into my repo and then spread the word about the same. That's it. Any questions, anyone?
Um, Hi Kishore. Yeah, we have some questions on YouTube. So I'll paste those questions one after the other here in the chat.
Yeah, sure, Kiran.
Yes, I just pasted one question in the chat.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Can you see it? Hello, Kishore. Uh, Kishore, you are on mute. Kishore, are you still there in the call? Hello?
Yes, Kiran. Am I
Yeah.
done? Actually, I got disconnected. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So we have some questions. Uh, so the first question is, is it inspired from state machines? Uh,
State
Kishore?
machines. Yeah. Can you hear me, Kiran?
Yes.
So I don't say that inspiration came from state machine in specific. There is this metaphor called flow, right? Like when
Yeah.
you look into a programming language, like let's suppose it just flows from top to bottom, and all you do is you just go with the flow, right? Like you go step by step, one after the other, rather than having look at it like one single data snapshot like we do in JSON schema or any other kind of schema that we look over online. FlowJV approaches it in a different way. Like it takes instructions from top to down approach, right? So I would say this is inspired from this metaphor of flow.
Okay, okay, got it. So the second question is, how do I test a form built with FlowJV?
Yes. So if you look into the document, the talk I have given just now, actually FlowJV is a monorepo architecture where we have got three different packages. One is FlowJV, which is the core engine of validations and stuff, and the other one is FlowJV React, which is nothing but the UI binding for this FlowJV library. It provides auto flow stuff that I have shown, where we are having all the elements defined in the UI. All those rules were uh, defined within this FlowJV React package, and this FlowJV React takes a configuration. Like it just flows, that's fine. So FlowJV React is not opinionated, it's very unopinionated, and the UI needs to be configured using FlowJV React. So the way it works is, if you know about React renderer, where you can have custom render for React, right? The React DOM we use is for web browser stuff, and then React Native has got its own renderer. In the same way, FlowJV also has bindings, UI bindings. So FlowJV React material, the one I shown, is is a configuration given to FlowJV React for material UI. So in the same way, you can define your own UI, just like saying that, all right, if it is a property and if it is of type string, this is how I want it to be displayed. If it is an array, and if I get multiple elements, this is how it should be defined. So you just give it a configuration, and FlowJV React takes care of the rest. So if you look into the documentation, that is properly documented over there, and you can see it, and it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. So
Yes.
one more question we have is, how do we implement custom constraints on the fields? Like, password should be of 6 letters, or numbers should have a capital letter, something like that. So how can we
Yes.
implement
So
constraints like that?
if you remember the confirm password string validation that I've shown, it's just a function, right? So 1 second. Yeah. So here in validations, I have written a logic which is nothing but a simple JavaScript function, right? This is just a JavaScript function. And all I'm doing is I'm just returning it, saying that if data.password triple equals ref, then it is valid validation, otherwise not. So within the password field as well, you can define validation saying the logic for specific password is I want to have ref within password, like, which is nothing but data.password of length whatever, and you can just go as crazy as you want. It's just a function, and it also has custom error message, so you can define multiple validations with multiple different error message relevant to that specific validation.
Okay. So one more question is, how to embed a function in the schema so that data is from the Ajax queries. Let's say if we have a select box, if you want to fetch the data for the select box, the options for the select box via Ajax query, how to do that?
So for that, what I would suggest is there is something called render map. So the schema cannot contain that logic, right? So there is something called render map within FlowJV form where you can define custom UI element for it. Like let's suppose I have got email, right? So now I can say when it comes to an email, I want to render a different field. Like let's suppose this is email and I get something called type. Okay, like props. Now if props dot type triple equals simple, and then props dot schema dot type is a string, right? So I can just return something called input type equals text, and then I can, so this is just a React component where you can hook in whatever component you want to a specific field, right? So in here I would say value is equal to props dot value, and then on change is equal to props dot set value of props dot path comma e dot target dot value. So this is nothing but this, and then return null. Yeah. So if I do that, when it comes to an email, is that an email? Okay, this is no more an email. It's profile details dot email, right? Because we have added this stuff. So this is going to be profile details dot email, which is going to be this. Now, if you want to have some kind of whatever Ajax call and Ajax request you want to have within this, that can be put within this function, and that will be taken care. And
Okay,
one
got
more
it.
thing is, yeah, and one more thing is the schema that we have defined in flow schema is completely customizable. Like you can define your own UI types, like UI to be, if you can see there is something called UI type radio, you can say it as Ajax select or multi select or whatever. So this is completely up to you. The UI that is by default provided by FlowJV is very limited, and that will be extended, but then you can always extend it using FlowJV React package. We are directly using FlowJV React material, which is which where the configuration is taken care by us. But if you have custom requirements, you can always tweak FlowJV React directly. Yeah.
So one more question is, can we use this for Vue and Svelte?
No, we cannot. This is completely React specific.
Okay. So, but it has like two parts, right? It's the schema part and the React bindings part.
Yeah,
So,
schema part you can use it. In fact, if you are well versed in Vue and Svelte, you can always use uh, So this is how the architecture of FlowJV is, right? So you got this FlowJV React, and FlowJV Material. And Material is nothing but the UI binding. So when what I mean by UI binding is, all I do is I set up FlowJV and I say that if it is of type simple, string type, I want to render a string field. If it is of type number, render a number field. If it is of type enum, it's of enum field, right? So this is a custom configuration. And this is all the material UI stuff that you're looking at. It's all just this configuration, that's it. So you can always create another config, and this is React specific. Now, if you look into the FlowJV React, uh, so this is how the FlowJV form component is created. There is something called within FlowJV, we have something called compile schema, right? The schema, whatever we are defining in FlowJV, that can be compiled so that we can get some insights out of it, and we can use that insights to create all this functionality, like when should and if condition should be hidden, or else block element should be displayed. All that stuff is taken care in compile schema. So that is a bit internal, but if someone wants to really want to contribute to this, please feel free to contact me, and I will give you enough context so that we can move this even more forward.
Great, awesome. Yeah, nice work, Kishore. Thanks for sharing this in our
Yeah.
meetup.
Thanks, Kiran. Yeah.
Yeah, so one more question is, can we use this in React Native? But again, I think you will need one more package, right? Like FlowJS, React.
So yes, so if FlowJV React has peer dependency of React DOM, so probably I will remove this so that you can use it for React Native as well. Yeah, I will do that.
Great.
That's fine. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I think that's all the questions we have for now, Kishore. I think I will share this in the Twitter also, and maybe hopefully more people will join this project and contribute as well.
Definitely. So you guys can look into this flowjv.js.org. So Kiran will put it in this. So you can
Yeah,
look into the documentation and everything, and you can go dive further. This is really interesting. Uh, yeah, you guys need to look into this. Yeah.
great.
Thanks, Kiran.
Uh, yeah,
Thank you so
thanks,
much.
Kishore. So then we will move on to the second talk. So our second speaker is Aditya. He will be talking about React Native performance. So Aditya, you can share your screen and take over.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just give you a minute. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Hello, you all. So I'm going to talk about React Native performance. Starting with, I will touch upon internal so you can understand the whole system better. Then I will move forward with performance in context of internals. So you can take better ideas when choosing a library and taking decision for architecturing your mobile app better. So let's understand how React Native is handling our UI and business logic. So React Native has three threads: JavaScript thread, where our UI is declared in JSX and where our business logic resides; Shadow thread, where shadow nodes for layout are created; Platform thread, where UI is painted and native events like touch and scroll are recognized and handled. Now, the communication between these threads is asynchronous and done by JavaScript Bridge. Creation of views, responding to events, everything needs to be passed by JavaScript Bridge because both of the threads doesn't know what's going at the other side, right? Now, example, where JavaScript thread will send message to native thread that I want to create this view, okay, and it will send the styles and every property, right? Now, every style you define, like opacity, background color, everything will be actually set to native like this. This is a small example, the small piece of code. The property you will pass will be set to native like this. So at the end, everything is going to native. That is the whole selling point of React Native. So how does the exact rendering is happening? Our view goes to traditional React.create element, and if we console log it, we can see a large object. Now on the JavaScript side, React decides, and it will create a fancy virtual DOM. And as soon as it knows that I need to update or create a new node, it will send that node to shadow thread. But now here comes some tricky part. Our native platform doesn't understand Flex at all. So React Native uses Yoga layout engine. If if we explain it in a very simple terms, it will just mathematically calculates the view positions and it will create a node out of it. Now the shadow thread leverages this. It will create shadow nodes that are used primarily for layouting. So it needs to extend Yoga node to allow all of it. Now native platform will pick this node and paint it. So as our UI is painted through native side, how native events like touch and scroll are handled. Because these events are identified at the native side as the rendering is happening all native. And these events are identified at native. But our responder, like a on-click function, is residing on the JavaScript side. Now, everything might sound like a magic. So let's just see this piece of code. Now, like many of you, even I don't understand native at all, but we can use our basic understanding of programming to understand this. Now, to explain this piece of code in just what it's doing is whenever there's a click, what it will do is that it will dispatch an event. Let's just suppose it will say I'm being clicked with the help of React tag. What is React tag? You can consider this as identifier which helps both the native and JavaScript side to respond because both of the platforms doesn't know right what to execute because when you click a button, okay, there are a lot of functions residing on the JavaScript side. How it will identify that I need to execute this function which was associated with this button. Again, React helps us with that because there is a copy of DOM in JavaScript world. So it will leverage this React tag to find the node and execute that associated function with it. Now coming to handling performance. So performance in React Native apps are primarily compromised because of JavaScript bridge. As it is used to communicate between native side and JavaScript side, sometimes when there are too many operations going around, our JavaScript bridge is choked. And the best way to look at the situation is like this. So when the Suez Canal was locked at the trade stop, no, trading was disturbed. Ships either had to wait or take another route. Same what happens in JavaScript bridge world. Sometimes bridge gets choked because of too many operations going around. But sadly, we don't have any other route to travel. So all the pending operations need to wait till the route that is here, the JavaScript bridge is clear. So the key to make your app perform better is by taking care of JavaScript bridge and to ensure that the bridge is as free as possible so it can respond to event as soon as it can. Now you might think that every library you should choose should be made with native code. So all heavy operations are executed on native side, but that's not true. When choosing the library, you should draw a line of when to pick native solution or JavaScript based solution. When needed, use dedicated libraries for native behavior, such as navigation, animation, and calendar. Native components such as accordion or checkbox doesn't make that much sense. So while building your application, you need a navigation library, right? So for navigation, we have two popular libraries, which are React Native Navigation, which offers us complete native navigation, which is better in terms of performance and gives us a proper native look and feel in terms of when navigating to another screen, transitions and everything. Now, another is React Navigation, which provides us two APIs. One is Create Stack Navigator, and the other is Create Native Stack Navigator, which is made over React Native screens. So you can consider Create Stack Navigator more of a JavaScript based solution. It is made over community libraries, and it mimics the native behavior of navigation. So the biggest benefit you can consider here is that your navigation transition and animation will look exactly the same no matter what platform or the device you're running on, Android or iOS, it won't matter. Another is Create Native Stack Navigator, and it offers us native navigation, just like React Native Navigation. So let us compare the performance of Create Stack Navigator, Create Native Stack Navigator, and React Native Navigation. So I'm going to demonstrate you an example in one video. In that example, I'm going to navigate to one screen, come back, and again navigate, going back and forth 2 times. The video is going to be laggy anyway because of some internet issue. Then I will show you the flipper messages to explain you more better. So this is the example of Create Stack Navigator. Wait a minute, it should open up. Now, as you can see, the lowest we hit was 37 in the JavaScript. And let's see our Flipper logs. Now, Flipper is a debugger tool, and in this tool, I'm using a smart thing from which I can see bridge messages. Now, as you can see, the direction is JavaScript to native here, and you can see it is invoking native animation. So, as you can guess, as I said earlier, that it is a JavaScript-based solution. And recently, the animation the Create Stack Navigator uses is made with Vanilla Animated API. So you might see a performance degradation there. So now coming to Create Native Stack Navigator, the lowest was 47 in the Flipper logs. As you can see, everything is handled at the native side here. So first as we can see that there was a performance boost here, right? And everything was handled at native rather on JavaScript. So, and here comes React Native Navigation. Again, the lowest we hit was 47. And as you can see here, the navigation is getting handled at native side. Now, you can see that React Native Navigation also handles our navigation on the native side. So, and also Create Native Stack Navigator offered us a similar performance of React Native Navigation. So you may ask that what should we pick? So the only big difference here is that React Native Navigation also offers a native shared element transitions, whereas we don't have anything similar on Create Native Stack Navigator. Now coming to animation library. So for animation, React Native provides us animated API, which does all layout computation for every single frame on JavaScript side and send it over to native via bridge. And as you can guess, this is way too heavy, but it also provides us the option to use native driver, which ensures all calculation for interpolation or layout happens on the native side rather on the JavaScript side. But in the end, animated API communicates by the JavaScript bridge. As I explained earlier, how touches are recognized and handled in React Native. Now imagine a scenario where API calls are going around and you are scrolling a list with a collapsible header. Chances of getting a bridge choked are high. And when you tap one button, it might not even respond because the bridge is choked and it can't respond to anything now. Now, another is Reanimator 2. So to understand Reanimator 2, let's go back how React Native is working. As I talk about platform thread, we know that JavaScript is single threaded, but native platforms aren't. So like in native Android, we can have multiple threads. One thread is like just only responsible handling UI, other to recognize touch event, serialize to JSON and send over the bridge. Now, as you can see, our UI thread is pretty much free and it can respond to anything. Now, Reanimator 2 leverages this. It will provide us worklets, which are tiny chunks of JavaScript code that can be moved to a separate JavaScript VM and execute synchronously on the UI thread. You might be thinking that if we need to execute a side effect or animation, let's just suppose to delete an item from array. How can we do that? Because now the animation is on the completely on separate thread. But you can do that because Reanimated 2 provide us run on JS completely out of the box. You can just pass your function and it will just run smoothly. Now, let's come to performance part. In these example, I'm just going to translate a box and I will show you the flipper messages side by side. So this example is an Android API without native driver. Now you might say that the animations were quite smooth and what's the problem here? But as you can see here, wait a minute. But as you can see, every calculation is happening on JavaScript side and sending over the bridge again and again. And this task is way too much heavy, and you should ignore this. You should ignore using animated API without native driver as much as possible. Now, coming to animated API with native driver, again, the animation was quite smooth. But on Flipper, you can see that no calculation has been done on JavaScript side. The animation is just initiated from JavaScript and all the calculation and layout things happen on the native side. So there is less bridge traffic here. But in the end, it uses bridge to communicate. And if possible, we should avoid that because for animation, we don't want that there should be a delay. Responding to touch events should be fast and quick as possible. Now here comes reanimated 2. Okay, now here comes the surprising part. You won't see anything going from JavaScript to native, neither from native to JavaScript. And you might ask me that why? Because there should be a bridge communication, right? Uh, Reanimated 2 uses JSI. To just simplify this thing, JSI doesn't need to use bridge to communicate with the native side. To know more about JSI, you should see more talks about the new architecture coming to React Native. Sorry, I can't touch on it now because of time constraints. Now, coming to handling big list. So when you are dealing with big list, and we know that the maximum list items are going to have the same viewports, then we should opt for recycle list too instead of flat list or virtualized list because both flat list and virtualized list are JavaScript based solutions. And recycle list 2 is also a JavaScript based solution, but it takes a different approach of solving big list. What it does is that it uses cell recycling. Instead of creating the same viewport views again and again, it will instead reuse them. So it doesn't need to cross bridge that much. So, but again, it also depends on different use cases because a chat UI with recycle list view won't be idle fit because every chat message will have different viewports. So their flat list might be a better solution. Apart from handling the virtualization, there are other things to which can boost your performance for big list, which are caching your images. React Native fast image is very great because you can also give a priority uh, to which image to load fast. And also using Memo for rendering child components also adds a huge difference. Also, Recycle list 2 gives us the ability to create amazing layout. Behind the scene, everything is position absolute aligned. And just like Flatlist, it's made of scroll view. Another thing is that its API is little bit hard to understand, but if you get a grip on it, you can control your layout. Like it's best out there to control your layout. It's that nothing else. So as you can see this layout, the same layout, okay, sorry. Yeah, the same layout cannot be made with thread list because thread list either will create a grid using number of columns, but recycle list, as I said, positions everything absolute. So this kind of layout is very easy to achieve with recycle list too, and it's very performant too. So you should use memo and use project more and more. So as I explained earlier that our business logic resides in the JavaScript thread. And in order to execute JavaScript, we need an engine that might be JSC or Hermes. Now, whenever there are unconditional re-renders happens, those views aren't recreated from the native side, but a lot of memory is wasted because of diffing algo at which React does and anonymous functions like array.length type method inside render and tensor.log are actually all JavaScript engine tasks. And already it's doing a lot of work in React Native React. So Memo and use callback can help us here. So in the Flipper messages, which I'm going to show you, I created a small POC where in 90 seconds, I added 460 to 480 items in Flatlist by tapping on a button continuously. The bridge was choked either way, but with Memo, render time and bridge free time had a significant difference. Uh, as you can see, this is with Memo, and the commit time and the free time, everything is here. You can see 171 render time and it got free at 342. Now without memo, you can see it's way too high. It's like a 50% performance. It's like 50% difference here. The last is using Hermes engine. Hermes engine improves Android performance a lot because JSC existed for iOS devices because of Safari, but for Android it was specially built and bundled. That's why iOS have better performance and Android applications have a bigger size because JSC is shipped with it. Now enabling Hermes will result in improved startup times, decreased memory usage, and smaller app size. And now iOS support is also out and Hermes is like no-brainer. You should definitely opt in for this. Uh, that's it from my side. And before ending, I would like to thank all of my mentors who pushed me to encourage to give this talk and verified my talk material too. Thank you all for this. Uh, I'm done with the talk. Any questions? Hello.
Yeah. Uh, so if you have any questions, you can ask right now.
Should I stop sharing?
Uh, yeah, you can keep it for a while.
Okay.
Um, so we don't have any questions, but someone asked to share the link. So we can I share the link which you have
Yeah.
given me?
Yes, you can share it. I was going to share
Okay.
it after the talk anyways on my Twitter. So you
Yes,
can
yes,
share
yeah.
it.
Yeah, so I shared it in YouTube, that video stream as well. Yeah. Uh, Thanks, Aditya. Thanks for sharing. Uh,
Okay, I'll stop here. And thank you so much for giving me a
yeah,
chance to present here.
yeah. Thanks, Aditya. So now we'll take a very quick 5-minute break if you want to grab some water or something, you can grab now, and maybe we'll start around 3-5. Aditya, we have one question.
Yes.
So the question is, did you use any additional plugins with Clipper?
Yes. The plugin, I forgot its name, but it helps us to see the bridge messages. I don't remember its name,
Okay.
but it's there. Let me search in and give the answer
Sure.
right away.
Yeah, you can put it in the YouTube video stream.
The plugin was Flipper plugin Bridge Spy. The name is Bridge Spy.
Okay, Bridge Spy.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I posted in the YouTube thing.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, that's the only question we got. Yeah.
Okay.
Balu?
Yes, Kiran.
Yes, yeah, maybe you can share your screen.
Yeah.
So hi everyone. I hope you grabbed some water or took a short break. So our next speaker is Balu. He will be talking about server side events. Building real time applications with server side events. Yeah, you can get started, Balu.
Yeah. Is my screen visible? Yes.
Yes. Yes.
My screen visible. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Balu. I'm a full stack developer at Grey Scientific Labs. So today I'm going to talk to you guys regarding real-time apps, building real-time apps with server-side events in React.js. So just before I start, I would like to state that in all my years of coding and visiting hackathons and taking part in a lot of conferences, I've noticed that not many developers are familiar with server-side events, or SSE for short. It kind of caught me off guard, because whenever I think of building some real-time applications, I always the first thing that I think is, okay, can I build it using server-side events? And if I can't, is when I go to some other methods. So it kind of caught me off guard when I found out not many developers are aware about what server-side events are and what a good alternative they are to something like WebSockets or something. Uh, for certain use cases. So with that out of the way, I'm just going to start with so when you look at any traditional front-end client application, right? One way all of us are accustomed to receiving data from the server is by sending a simple HTTP request, a get or a post request to the server, and getting a response back. Now, when you look at it in the lens of a real-time application, this would mean that you constantly send a request over and over and again, and you get a response back from the server. Now, I mean, yes, while this certainly will work, it is not it's not the most efficient way to do it, because one, you're making too many network requests, and two, the response you get may be exactly the same as the response you received previously, and it may be exactly the same to what you will receive next. So when you look at certain use cases where where your data doesn't update as not as fast as you want, and so that way the response you get back might be the same for a lot of requests. So that is one disadvantage with the traditional polling method, which is just a simple HTTP request, right? One way we can overcome this is by using long polling, which is similar to polling. But the difference with long polling is that when the client makes a request to the server holds on to that request and does not send a response back until it is ready. So this may take a while. So once the server has the response ready, it sends the response back to the client, and then the client closes the connection, and then rinse and repeat. This is slightly better, but it still shares some of the shortcomings of polling. That is, you still need to for every time for a real time application, you're still making too many network connections. One thing I need to tell about long polling is that, as I mentioned, right, the server, the connection, once the client sends a request, the server does not send the response back immediately. It waits for a while, and then once it is ready, once the response is ready, it sends it to the actual client. We can set a timeout, beyond which just close the connection and try again. So that is long polling. And I know WebSockets, this is what most of us default to whenever we want to build any real-time application, right? This is what it's widely used. It's quite old, actually. It's very well-defined framework with support in most browsers. So whenever we think of any real-time application, WebSockets is what we go to. And just to kind of give you a brief explanation on how WebSockets work, right? WebSockets is a bidirectional communication that happens between the client and the server. Basically, the clients, it establishes a connection with the server, and after after the TCP handshake occurs with the server, there is a persistent connection between the client and the server. And in this connection, the client can send data to the server and the server can send data to the client. So it's a bidirectional communication, and it by all means is pretty great. And WebSockets are great, and you must use them. I really encourage people who haven't worked with WebSockets to learn about them and build a project or two, because they truly are amazing things to build. And to know how to use them would be a invaluable asset. So WebSockets is a persistent connection between the client and the server, and it's bidirectional. Now coming to server-side events. Now server-side events are similar to it's kind of similar to WebSockets, but at the same time it's kind of similar to long polling as well. So it is somewhere right in between. So how server-side events works in a nutshell is that the client sends a request to the server, and the server, on receiving the request, sends a response back. But what happens here is that the connection is not closed immediately. Like WebSockets, the connection between the client and the server is persistent, and the client can receive a response after response after response from the server once the server sends something back. So when you look at it that way, server-side events is kind of similar to WebSockets, but it is but it has one major difference that separates it from WebSockets. That is, in server-side events, data transmission is unidirectional from server to client. Vice versa is not possible. Unlike in WebSockets, where the client is also capable of sending data back to the server, in server-side events, it is not possible to do that. And that's not that much of a problem, because depending upon your use case, this may or may not be a problem, right? And that's why you look at it, right? Server-side events are typically used in places like news feeds, notifications, simple games like chess, where you don't really need a client to server-side communication. It's just receiving data. So when you look at it that way, server-side events are extremely easy and extremely easy to use, and they're pretty good actually. And you'll understand why server-side events are useful, and you should use them as you look at other aspects of it, which I'll explain on. So one of the beauty with server-side events is that they can be implemented in any framework, right? So if you look at any framework like Flask or Node Express or Node.js or Python or Ruby or Golang or something, the only thing you need to do in the server end is basically set these three parameters in the header. That's basically set the content type to a stream, a text stream, the cache control, no cache, and connection to keep alive. Why we do this is because server-side events, the response that is received back from the server is a text file. It's basically a text file. So that is why the content type has to be set to this in order to receive this. And it is extremely easy to set this in in Python, Node.js, or Ruby, or Go or anything. You just need to set these in the header, and the response that is sent back has to follow this particular format. Now, if you do these two things, you can you can establish an SSE sub. Excuse me, an SSE server. Now, if you look at this message format, it is basically how the response is going to look like. You see it has three parts to it: an ID, an event, and a data. Now, you don't need to send an ID and an event all the time, and I'll get to why, and I'll get to why you need to send those eventually. For all, if you're just looking at something very simple, you can just send data, and in data you can send any text file, you can send a JSON, you can send anything there. And that's pretty much it. So it's this simple. It's just two steps to build a simple SSE server. Now coming back to why you need ID and event, right? One of the beautiful things about server-side events is that the client automatically re-establishes the connection with the server if the connection is lost for any reason. right? And in such an event, if we want the data flow to seamlessly flow through, meaning we don't want to refresh the page, or we just want it to just continue even after disconnection and reconnection, we want the data stream to just continuously flow. ID is really useful there. And event is basically just like, you can just like in sockets where you can have different, you can have different, like depending upon what the server emits, you can have a set response in the client end. Similar to that, even in server-side events, you can have an event, and depending upon the event that is sent in the response, you can have the front end, the client side perform a particular action. So this is an example of how a simple request may be like, right? Where you have you can have just a ID is just a random number and the event, and in the data you can see there's a JSON object there. One important thing to notice is that at the end of the request, you can see there are two new line characters, escape characters, the backslash n, right? Now the backslash n, the two backslash n's basically tell the client app that this is the end of the response, and because of that, it is extremely important that they are present in the server as well. So this is like, very simple. This is how simple it is to set up a simple SSE stream in Flask, right? It's just like 4 or 5 lines of code, and you can have you can set up an SSE endpoint in your API. And for those of us for Node.js fans, this is how simple it is. And like I mentioned before, right, the only thing you need to do is just set the content type. You just need to set the 3 parameters in the header, that is connection, content type, cache control, to the things to those 3 things, and that's pretty much it. And then your response has to follow the message format as I mentioned before. And if these 2 things are taken care of, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all you need to do to establish, server-side events in your server. Whereas, if you look at like WebSockets, it's a bit, there's a little bit more, setup that needs to be done. So, and in the client end, it's literally this simple. You just set up a new event source, and then you listen to events from the stream, and depending upon the event type, you perform a particular action on it. So it's literally this simple to have SSE setup. So yeah, so I'll just very quickly move on to the demo. I would like to share my Kiran. I would like to share my camera. Yeah. Hey guys. So for the demo, I built a very simple. I've built this very simple application that receives data from a sensor basically, and it displays the values in a React web application. So I built this very simple. It's a very simple sensor circuit that just reads data from this humidity sensor and this light sensor here, and it uploads it to a MongoDB instance that I'm running locally. Okay. Yeah. So here you can. Okay. Let me stop my video. Yeah. Is my screen visible? Yeah. So my screen is visible, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So if you guys can see my screen right now, you can see that there's it's a very, very, very simple demo that what it does is it receives data from the server, 3 sensors basically, a simple light sensor, air temperature, air humidity sensor, and it displays the values in real time here. Now, one thing you need to know is that I've added a delay in the sensor end. I've added a 5-second delay. That means every 5 seconds it updates a value. So it updates a value to the MongoDB in the MongoDB database, and then I read that value and I just display it here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly shine a torch in the light sensor, and you'll see that after a small delay, you see the value almost instantly goes up, right? And so this is and And if I were to explain the code to you, right? So it's literally, so this is a very simple a Flask API that I have that has two endpoints. One endpoint to receive data from the sensor and just save it in the database, and the other endpoint is the actual meat of the whole operation here. So what it does is we have a function that is on a loop, and what it does is it reads data from the MongoDB database that I have running locally, and it just appends it to an array and just sends it, right? It's nothing more. It's literally this simple, guys. In the server end, to just have to set up a server side stream going on, and in the front end as well. Now, one thing you need to mention, one beautiful thing about server-side events is most browsers except Internet Explorer support it, and who uses Internet Explorer these days? So almost all browsers support server-side events natively, and I'm not using any external API or anything. I'm just using the inbuilt event source API that is available to me, and all I'm doing is I'm just setting up a is it visible? Yeah. So all I'm doing is I'm just setting up a simple stream here, and then I'm listening to events on message, on error. What happens is once the connection is established, I pass the JSON, because as I mentioned before, right? The response is a text file basically in server-side event. So I pass it back into a JSON, and I just set a hook to that value, and that value I send it to these components that basically display the data you see here. It's literally this simple, guys. And the code for both the server and client-side applications are in my GitHub, which the link will be posted in the chat, so you guys can take a look at that. And it's literally this simple. Now, if you remember one thing, if you remember my presentation, you can see that there's this ID, event, and data here. Basically, this is so the demo I showed right now. There is no it's just sending data. It's not sending anything else. But what I can do is I can I can have a very simple I can just have very simple endpoint app.route, where I can show you how I can get that event thing to work as well. So I'll just have a simple stream 2. You have to excuse me for this for the namings. Let's go stream 2. So yeah. So what I'm doing here is basically I'm just response is equal to, I'm just just getting a random value. Random. I'm just response just random value between 0 to 100. And what I'm doing is that I'm printing it out here, right? So time dot cell, and then there's a small I'm waiting for 3 seconds. So in order to have so response it's just a simple number, so I don't need to do something. So one thing I can do is I can set an event to it. I can call the event I don't know user string, and I /n, and then ID can be it can be response again, then /n. So here if you look at stream 2. So if you look at this particular stream endpoint as compared to this here, you can see that I'm only sending the data, that is the sensor thing. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm sending an event, that event of user stream, an ID of response, and the data, the actual data, which in this case is just some random number between 0 and 100. So let me just restart the server.
Balu?
Yes.
one question we have is, can you show the network tab in the browser and show how the requests are going?
Sure. Oh, I need the. So I'm just waiting for this to happen. Okay. Yeah. Run into a small video. 1 second. Perfect. Waiting to connect to server. All right. The view function did not return a valid response. The function either returned none or ended without a return statement. All right. Okay. So seems to be an issue here. All right. So show that later. Something seems to be something wrong with that. Excuse me, guys. There just seems to be a small issue in the server side. Is my thing running? Yes, it is.
So are you returning the response in that new function?
Yeah, so I've run into a small issue in the server side. Okay. So as soon as I get it running, I will show to you guys. I'm unable to connect to the server. Response time.sleep. Yeah, back. All right. So here you can see in the network tab that you see that so you can see stream that the connection is established, but it's not closed. It keeps going. The connection is established, and the server constantly receives data from the server, and as I mentioned before, right, the connection is persistent. The server can send data to the client, but the reverse is not possible. There are ways in which you can do that, but I wouldn't really recommend So just to kind of show you, this is real time. I'll just shine a simple torch on the light, and you can see the values changing. So there is one way in which you can send data from the client back to the server, but it's not ideal. That is, you can use query strings, and you can use query strings to send data from the front end to the server. and in the server you can read the query strings and you can use that data to do whatever you want. But that approach it carries the problems query strings have. So you need to know that. And so yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. You guys can reach out to me on Twitter. That's my, and you can email me, and that's my GitHub. So thank you guys, and yeah, that's my talk. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Yeah. So Balu, we have one question.
Yes.
Like the question is, would this SSC server handle more connections compared to WebSockets?
Okay. Yeah, that is a good question. To give you honestly, in my experience, right, I can't really say yes. I can't really say no to this, because in my experience, right, I've seen servers based on SSC and servers based on WebSockets perform equally well. So I'm I'm not really sure if I'll have to kind of get back to you guys on this, but I don't see any reason why. I don't really think there's going to be that much of a difference in terms of performance in SSC versus WebSockets. Yeah.
Great.
SSC is like is a great it's a great API, is a great thing you guys can use to build your applications. And in my company we use it for production live production ready things, and it works beautifully. So
okay. So can we run it on the same server? In the sense, yeah. It definitely is more intensive, right? In the sense, because the connection is alive. Yes. So is there any limitations on the number of connections it can have?
I'd say that depends on your server. Like, I mean, if you theoretically, for as long as your server can handle it, you can have that many connections running on your server, connected to your server. So I'd say that the bottleneck there is your actual server there. But just to give you an idea, so in our company we have self-hosted. We have our applications hosted on a pretty decent server, and we are still able to handle close to more like 1,000 plus clients in our company. So we haven't really found any issues when it comes to. I'd say to give you the right answer, I think the bottleneck there becomes your server. If your server can handle it, I believe that this thing can scale really well. Like you mentioned, right? It's running on the same server, so it's extremely simple to do.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Any more questions, guys?
Yeah, so that's all the questions we have. Yeah, thanks for introducing this new concept for us, man. This is the first time we are hearing. Even I never tried this.
See, this is my point exactly. My point exactly.
Great.
We're all used to WebSockets are good. WebSockets are good, and like WebSockets are like amazing, but server-side events are a bit simpler. They're extremely simple to implement in any thing you can think of, right? So I'd encourage people to take a look at server-side events, and my demo here is like an excellent. It's a nice, it's a very simple demo, and it's pretty good description of what a potential use case could be. Receiving data and displaying data from server.
Yes, exactly.
Kiran, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just noticed a question in the chat. Do you mind if I answer it?
Yeah, sure, you can answer.
Yeah. Right. Tristan basically asked whether query strings would be bad to talk back to the server. I mean, see, query strings have problem that is, if you have some sensitive data in the actual query string, right, people could sniff it out. It's quite easy to do that. So you can technically send data from the client to the server using query strings, and you can perform that thing. But I wouldn't, if you're looking at if you have to send some sensitive data, or something you don't want others to find out, then I wouldn't really recommend using query strings. So yeah, and I really there's one. Okay, so in production, right? So Shailaja, so you asked a very good question actually. So what could a real use case for SSE be in production? So SSE, you can use it if you have like a news feed. If you have any application where you're just expected to receive data, that's pretty good use case for SSE. You can use SSE for news feeds, like Facebook news feeds, and like you can use it for news feeds. You can use it for notifications. You can build like simple games, like like a simple chess game, which is what I wanted to do for the demo, but I didn't get the time. And you can build like I showed right now, right? You can read sensor data, and for things where, for applications where you just are expected to receive data, for something like like stock, if you want to see what the stock price is, or something like that, right? SSE would be ideal for something like that. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed my talk. And once again, you can contact me on the channels you see on the page. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. And the code, everything you see is available in my GitHub. So yes, thank you, Kiran. Thanks, React Bangalore, for this. And over to you, Kiran.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Balu. It's really good talk, and we learned something new today. We'll definitely going and try it out and see, learn more about server-side events.
Sure. My pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we'll go on to the next talk. Our next speaker is Apur. Apur,
Yeah.
you can share your screen.
Thanks, Kevin. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So hi everyone, I am Apur, and today I'll be talking about authentication using NextAuth.js. So just to give a small introduction about me, I am currently in a final year of engineering, and I'm working as a software development intern at Innovator. And you can connect to me on Twitter. I go by username Apur_Taneja. So let's talk about NextAuth.js. So basically, what is NextAuth.js? So I was working on a side project a few months back, and I wanted to integrate authentication using Google. So I was looking around for a solution. Then I came across NextAuth.js. It's a beautiful library. It supports many OAuth providers such as GitHub, Google, GitLab, Twitter, and all the famous ones which you have heard of. And this talk will be going through the different OAuth providers. We'll see the different configurations we can integrate in it to make it more robust, to make it more secure, and customize it as per our needs. We'll see how to use JWT, or if you don't want to use JWT, how can we store the session of a logged in user in a database. You can use any database, and it can be either SQL or NoSQL database. And after this talk, I'll deploy the application, and you can check and play around with it if you feel like. So let's go to the code. So I'll be coding everything from scratch. I haven't coded anything yet. So this is a simple next app which I have created using the command which is npx create next app. So this is what I've just changed the text and everything. I accept that everything is from the template which you get. So this is an index.js page. I have a simple button in it, sign in, and on click, it doesn't happen anything as of now. So let's code from scratch. So I'll be importing, so let's, before going to the server side, let's go to the API side. So we'll, in the pages folder, we'll create a folder API, and inside API, we'll create auth folder, and inside auth, we'll create files. So this is basically a API route. So we'll import a NextAuth function from NextAuth, and we'll import providers. So providers is basically the different providers supported by NextAuth, which can be Google, GitHub, GitLab, and there are n number of OAuth providers. So basically you export the imported functions, export default NextAuth, and in that function, we'll pass an object. This object is basically the configurations which we want in our application. We can add database in this object. We can specify different providers we want to use. We can specify the hashing algorithm used in JWT. There are many configurations we can customize it as per our needs. So just to get a simple basic idea, I have included an object which has a provider's parameter. This provider parameter contains array of different providers which I want to use in my application. So as of now, I'm using Google. You can integrate uh, uh, other providers as well. That is providers dot, if you want to use GitHub, suppose, so you can set GitHub and you can get the client ID and client secret on your GitHub account. Suppose you want to integrate Twitter, so similarly you will write provider, you will do providers dot Twitter, and you will simply mention client ID and client secret. That's how you specify the different providers you want in application. When you go to a website, you see there are multiple options to log in via Facebook, Twitter, Gmail. So you can specify the different OAuth you want to use in your application. So let's go with the Google login as of now. So I've just specified the Google login in the backend part, and let's go to the client side. So I want on the on-click event of this button, I want to sign in using Google. This is what I have mentioned in the backend part. So I'll import a sign-in function. Right? This is a simple sign-in function. I want to call this function when the button is clicked. Right. So I have imported this function here. Now I'll reload the page. Yeah. So if I click on sign in, it redirects me to the page. This page is provided by NextAuth itself. So it redirected me to the page where it says sign in with Google. So if I click on sign in, it all the accounts logged in my application in my web browser will be displayed. If I click on this account, I'll be able to log in. Okay. So, but how to determine if I'm logged in or not? I am logged in, but it's still showing sign in. What is the way to check if the user is already signed in or not? So, NextAuth provide a simple React hook, which is use session. Use session is extremely simple. It can help us to determine if the person is already logged in into the application or not. So to check if the person is already logged in, we'll do something like const session loading is equals to use session. So the session is basically a session of a particular user who is logged in. Loading determines the state, whether if the session is being fetched or not. So if loading is still true, loading is always a Boolean value. If the loading is true, it means it is still fetching the details from the API. If it's not, we'll render this. So if we'll do something like if it's still fetching the details, if loading is true, we'll return simply a div which will say loading. Now I'll comment this div out and I'll render this stuff. So this div basically renders this is basically conditional rendering. I'll render auth buttons if the session is already there. If the session is already present, I want to display a sign out button. If there is no session, if the user is not signed, if the user is not signed in, we'll show a sign in button, right? So I'll just remove this. Yeah. So as you just a second. Yeah, so for sign out, I'll import a sign out. Yeah. So as we saw that we are already logged in, the session is present, so it rendered a sign out button. If I click on sign out, yeah, so I'm already signed up. So this is how a simple Google, how you can integrate a simple Google authentication in your application. So just to give you a demo again, we click on sign in. There's a sign in with Google. I click on it. All the accounts on my screen on web browser will be displayed. And yeah, you're logged in. So now what basically session consists of? Suppose it will contain your the expiry date of your session. It will contain detail about you, your name, your image associated with Google account, and email ID. Suppose when the person is logged in, I want to show the username. So if I do session, if my session is present, I want to display the name of the user. So what I'll do is, yeah. So I click on sign out. The session is not there, so this won't be displayed. I click on sign in. I do sign in with Google. I do click on my account. And yeah, the name associated with my account, which is Auth Taneja, is displayed. So I can render different content based on if session is present or not. So if I want to integrate GitHub authentication in this. So I'll do providers dot GitHub. I don't have the client ID for GitHub as of now, but let's keep it ID. This is obviously a random text. So you have to get a client ID, and I'll keep the client secret as just secret. So what happens now is instead of only showing a Google authentication button, it will show me GitHub login option also. So if I click on sign in, it will have both the options, sign in with Google and sign in with GitHub. So you can specify n number of different providers you want to use in your application. If you add GitLab, Twitter, it will display all the buttons on this page. This page is obviously customizable. Everyone doesn't want a black a page with a black background and buttons like that. So you can obviously customize this page. Next.js has the whole documentation on this, how you can do it. Now imagine you're building the application in which you just want to log in with Google, but if you don't want the user to go to this black screen and click on sign in with Google, so it becomes a two-step process. You just want a simple sign in with Google option on your website, so that whenever user click on this, it directly opens that Google authentication page, which we saw right now. So to implement that, what we'll do is, okay, I'll just first login. Yeah, so I'll just sign up. Yeah, so I'll first delete the GitHub provider. I just want Google authentication, and I don't want to go to that black page again and show me the sign in with button option there. What I can do is, in the sign in option, sign in function which I've imported from NextAuth, I'll pass a parameter which is Google. So this tell NextAuth that, hey, I want to log in, but I just want to use Google authentication service of yours. So please directly open a Google authentication page in front of me whenever I click on this button. And similarly for logout, also sign out, I just want to log out from Google, so I'll pass Google. So what happens in this case is, I click on this, directly opens to Google authentication. So instead of naming this button as sign in, you can do sign in with Google and make it a red color button, which usually Google has. So you can just directly open the Google authentication. If you don't want to go to, if you don't want your users to go to that black screen and display different buttons and things. So you can do that. Now, now suppose you want your, after login, you want your user to go to a specific page. You want a callback URL basically. You don't want user to stay on this page. It happens on websites like when you log into that website, you log in and it redirects you to a dashboard, a personalized dashboard. What you can do is, once you sign in, you can specify the callback URL which you want to go to, which you want your user to go to after logging in. So you can specify the callback URL here. So Yeah, so I want, after logging in, I want my users to go to dashboard. So I have already created a dashboard page in my application. So I just want, whenever user sign in gets completed, I want the user to redirect to this page. So if I click on sign in, okay, just a second. Just a second. I click on sign out. I try to sign in again. I sign in with Google. Okay, yeah. Now it redirects me to dashboard. So as the user sign in, I want the user to go to directly to dashboard. So you can use this callback URL function, and you can specify the URL which you want your user to redirect to after completing the sign in. Now after this, I'll tell you about I'll tell you about the database options which you can use. So suppose you want your users who have logged in, you want to store all the details which you can use which you can use later for communicating via emails or anything like that. So initially, I haven't specified any database in the configuration which is specified here. So basically what happens is it automatically uses the JWT cookie session by default. So if I don't specify any database configuration here, so there's a session property in this which uses JWT true by default. By default, it is used. Uh, by default, it is used when there is no database specified. So as of now, we are using JWT in our application. Now, once I specify the database in it, suppose if I specify the database configuration in it, I usually work with NoSQL databases. So I have MongoDB instance running in my local machine. So if I use database in it, I can toggle it. If I want to keep it as false, I can do it. So once I use the database property on it, all the user session will be stored in database. So whether application has to check if the user is logged in or not, it will go to the database session and verify instead of the JWT key. So I can keep it true, I can keep it false when the database is not there, when the database is present. But if database is not present, the JWT is true by default. So uh, I'll go, right now what I'm doing is I'm storing all the user information in the database. So if I click on sign in, I go to this account. Yeah, so I'm logged in as of now. So we'll check the database, what is stored in the database once we specified this detail. So let's go to the Mongo. The database which I mentioned was temp data. I'll see the collections. Yeah. So if we specify data, the three collections are automatically created by Next, which are accounts, session, and users. What are these three different collections which are created by it? So users collection basically store information such as username, email, and everything. I can show you. Users.find. We can see how many users are present as of now. So yeah, there's only one user who has logged into our application till now. It's my email ID. And if I go to the session, Yeah, so it basically contains the session token and all the details about the details such as ID, user ID, when it expires, and what was session token. So whether when an application has to check if the user is logged in or not, it verifies that if the session token is there and what is the expiry. So you can, so the Next.js application, NextAuth basically uses this to verify if the user is there or not when you specify the database parameter. In the account section, basically store the details about OAuth. So if I do accounts find routine, yeah, so it basically stores the detail about my OAuth. So the which OAuth I used was Google authentication, and what is my user ID there. So all the details user to the OAuth specifically are stored in this. Now let's talk about a different configuration of parameter which we can pass in it. So these are known as callbacks. Okay, before jumping to the callback, I'll let me tell you one more property which we can use in sessions. So there's a property which we can use in session which is max age. So max age basically tells how long an ideal session should expire. So by default, the max age is 30 days. If you log into an application and it stays idle, you don't use it, it will automatically be logged out after 30 days. It is mentioned in seconds. So if you do 30 into 60 into 60 into 24, this is basically 30 days. So it means after 30 days, you will automatically be logged out of this application. Just to give you a small demo, if you, okay, let's sign up. Let's sign up. Yeah. So suppose if I give max age as 5 seconds, I want the user to be logged out automatically after 5 seconds. So let's see how will it work. I click on sign in. Yeah, so I'm on dashboard right now. Okay. Yeah. So I'll click on sign in. I log in by my account. I'm redirected to the dashboard automatically because I've specified that in the callback URL. Once the 5 seconds are already over, so I'm already logged out of the application. So I'll remove the callback URL and I'll show what exactly happens. Okay. So I've removed the callback URL. So I click on sign in and go to my account. So now if I reload this page, I'm automatically logged out because 5 seconds are already over and my session is expired. So now you don't want the user to be automatically logged out after 30 days. So suppose you have specified the max age as 30 days. It is by default 30 days in NextAuth, but you don't want the user to be logged out even after 30 days. So you can specify a new property which is update age. Update age basically specify how frequently do you want NextAuth to write to your database to extend a session. This update age parameter can only be used when you are using database. It basically tells NextAuth, hey, listen, I want you to update the database session in every 10 days. Suppose we say 10 days, 10 into 60 into 60 into 24. So in every 10 days, it will tell the database to extend session by 30 days more. so that user never logs out. So in every 10 days, it will tell the database, hey, I want you to update the session of this user and update the max age by 30 days more. So this is how you can tell NextAuth to repeatedly write to your database so that user never gets logged out. So these are the different properties which you can mention in session. Now talking about a new one more configuration which we can do is called callbacks. So callback is basically the asynchronous functions which are provided by NextAuth, which can be used when a specific action is completed. So there are 4 different callback which are provided by NextAuth. We'll see each one. So the first one is sign in. So what this basically does is whenever it basically used to control if the user is allowed to sign in or not. So suppose if in the sign in as a function I return false, it always returns it returns usually 2 things. You can return a specific route or you can return a boolean value. So if I return false and if I try to log in now, access denied because I have written false. It won't allow the user to log in. But if I return true, which is by default, it will automatically allow me to log into the application. The use of this async function is, suppose you want the user, you want user on your application who belong to a specific domain. For example, I work with Innovator. So I want only those email whose domain is @innovator.com. So suppose my email is apurkanija@innovator.com. So I want only the user who belong to that particular domain name to log in. I can check there. I can check here. So how you can check here is there are 3 parameters which are provided here. Profile. So if you console a profile, you will see the name of a user, the image associated with user, and the email ID. So from here you can verify, you can check if the email ID which you are getting from the user object belongs to a particular domain or not. On that basis, you can decide if you want to allow that user to log in or not. Suppose I return true. Now we'll see the response of this user. What is exactly a user object? Click on sign in. I use this account. Now let's see what user is basically. So I'll go to my terminal. I'll see that. So this is the user object. It contains a specific ID associated with my account, the name, the email ID, and the image associated with that Google account. So you can use this information. You can check if the user belongs to that particular domain or not. So I want only the user belonging to a particular domain. You can check if the email ends with that particular part, then you can allow, otherwise you can return false. There's a one more callback which you can use, which is redirect. Async redirect. This function is called when you call the callback URL. We saw in the earlier part of the talk that when the person gets signed into the application, it was getting redirected to the dashboard. So this redirect callback is called whenever the user is being redirected or sign in or sign out. You can mention the callback URL even on sign out as well. So when a user is redirecting to the dashboard by logging in, if you want to do something, if you want to manipulate some request, or if you want to do something, we can use this redirect callback, and this is called whenever a person is being redirected. There's one more async function which is callback, which is provided by NextAuth, which is JWT. So this is basically called when the JWTs are created. These are called when JWTs are when we use JWTs as true. So this function is only called when JWTs are true, and we can basically play around if you want to add some information to it or not. We can play around with this. And there's a last callback which is provided by NextAuth, which is session. So this is an interesting callback because This session, this async callback is called whenever you use use session. We checked in this part of the code that use session is giving us two things, which are session and loading. So this callback is called whenever the use session is called anywhere in a project. Or there's a one more parameter, get session and use session. So whenever get session and use session are called, this callback is gets called. So we can add information to our session. Suppose the default arguments which are present here is this. So I want that I want to add a new property to the session. So I want session.token should be equal to the token which is provided, and I want to return this session. So basically what will happen is, if I try to console this session would contain a new property which would be session.token, and it will have this token object in it. So this is how a session is used. Suppose you want this user session, you want a token of that user, and you want to attach it to the session, and you want to use somewhere in your pages. You can use this callback. This is the use of that callback configuration. And there's one more configuration, which is JWT. JWT is you can like use JWT simply. It basically used to make your JWT more secure. You can, by default they are signed but not encrypted. The JWTs which are used in NextAuth by default are not encrypted. So you can use encryption here. And as you know that there are different hashing algorithms which are used here. So by default it uses HS512 algorithm, but if you want to use different algorithm as per your need, you can specify the different algorithms here which you want to use. So this configuration is used to make your application more secure, make more protected from different attacks, cyber attacks. This is how you can configure your JWT. We won't go into the detail of JWT. And one of the best thing about NextAuth is it has tab syncing and auto revalidation. So what is tab syncing? Suppose you are logged in two different tabs, and localhost 3000 and localhost 3000 also is opened in both tabs, and you logged in one tab. The in other tab you will automatically be logged in, because tab does sync. Similarly, if you log out in one of the tab, you will automatically logged out of the other tab. This is one of the feature provided by NextAuth. And there's one more feature which is auto revalidation. So you can specify how much duration you want to revalidate your sessions. Suppose this is the same thing which I mentioned there, update age, how often you want you want to update a particular session and write to that database. So these are the basic configurations which you can use in your NextAuth and integrate a simple OAuth flow in it. And you can use databases as per your need. The basic use of databases is just to store how many users have logged into your application. If you want to communicate to the logged in users, you want to send some advertisement mail, or just an example, anything like that. This is the major use of databases. Otherwise, on the client side, it's very simple. You just import a sign in function, sign out function, and you can log into the application. So that's it from my side. And you can check the NextAuth documentation. The documentation is also well maintained. You can go through it, the different configurations which I didn't talk about, as in JWTs. You can go and study more about the algorithms used in it, and explore the different providers such as Amazon login, Twitter login. You can check all of them. So you can go to the docs. It is NextAuth.js.org, and you can read more about it. So thank you so much for listening. This was my first talk. And thanks to Kiran for giving me opportunity to talk to. Uh, and if there are any improvements, if there is suggestion for me, please let me know how can I improve. And thank you so much for listening. Thanks, Kiran.
Yeah, nice talk, Apur. I think, can you take a look at the chat? I think there is one question.
Yeah, sure. How can I?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can click on the Zoom thing.
yeah, got it. Yeah, the update age can have a maximum value of. I'm not sure about the max. Okay, you're saying that if you have specified the max age, right? Yeah. Obviously, it won't. If you specify the max age as 30 days and you're updating after 30 days, it is of no point because user has been already logged out of the application as of now. So the update it should be lesser than the max age. Yeah. Next auth is just a webhook. Yeah. When the database is mentioned in the session where the credentials applied for it, which part of the code? So basically, I'm using the local instance of MongoDB here. So there's no admin and password which I have set up as per my need. So it's basically just, I'll show you. So, mm, so it's basically just I'm using MongoDB on this particular port. I have not specified the admin and specific password for that for my own ease. Otherwise, you can specify that there are different configuration for databases as well. If you're using SQL and there's an admin and password for it. If you're using NoSQL, there's admin and password for it. You can definitely mention it here. All this is provided by NextAuth. All this is covered. When you're calling like async sign redirect, does their promise resolved internally? Yes. Everything is resolved internally, so you don't have to worry about that. Like promises all certain, meaning if I redirect async fails, then mm, and if so, like promises are okay, meaning if redirect async fails, then the reason suspended. So redirect. So basically, when if you are in the redirect part and yeah, so as I told that the async session would be called whenever you are using use session hook. If you're not using the use session hook, the async session won't be called. So these are not linked to each other actually. So use async session would only be called when the use session hook is being used in the application. I guess that's what the question. That's all.
Yeah, so we have a few more questions on the YouTube.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll copy paste them in
yeah,
the
sure.
chat.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, can you see the question?
Can
Like
you expand
it's
not if integrate future also? Yeah, you can add a custom OAuth application. I think this is what it means. Can you expand Max or to future? Yeah, you can obviously integrate a custom OAuth in the next application. But NextAuth already covers most of the uh, popular OAuth providers. So but in case they are missing out on something, you can definitely do that. They have mentioned that in the tutorial part of their documentation. You can go and check it out. Yes, next OAuth is works only with Next.js. You can't use it in. It is basically made for serverless, so you can't. I think you can't use it in Vue or Svelte. It's limited to Next or serverless application, so you can't use it anywhere else. How can we protect route of pages? Yeah. So this is, as I told, the use session hook. So if you go to dashboard and if you import use session here, import use session from next client. So basically now you have use session hook. Now you have session with you. You have loading state. Now, so if you'll check, if it's still loading, you will display a loader because you don't know if the session is completely fetched or not. So you'll just display a div. Now you will check if the session is there, if there is a session. Okay, let's see if there's no session. You will simply redirect. You can import the route from next link from the Next.js, and you can simply do route dot push to whatever page you are. So if there's session, this part will get executed. If there is no session, it will automatically be redirected to this part. So you can use session hook to always see if the user is logged in or not.
Can we do this on the server side in the sense, maybe
Yeah,
in the gets?
yeah. On the server side, this is also supported. There's a hook called get session. Get session basically calls an API and returns a session. So if you are using get server side props in your next application and you only want to return a response if the person is logged in. So on the backend part, you can call the get session hook and check if the session is present or not. So this is also provided on the server side.
Great, awesome. Yeah, so that's all the questions we have, Apur.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the nice talk, and it's really informative.
Thank you so much, Kiran. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, so that's all the talks we have. Like we completed all the 4 talks. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and thanks for all the speakers for sharing their knowledge. And we'll catch up in the next meetup, hopefully in the next month. See you all again soon. Bye.
But
Bye, Kiran. Thanks.
Have a good
Yeah,
day, Kiran.
yeah. Thanks, Apur. Thanks, Aditya.